Hi, my name is Dave, and you're actually looking at the cover of a book I wrote last year. Now, the reason you're looking at that cover is I want to talk, this video is about the response we're hearing from Trump's comments about shithole countries last week in terms of immigration. And the reason you're looking at this book is I kind of talk about this in the book. This book is about looking at the future that's portrayed in Star Trek and applying their values and their practices to today's America. So, before I begin that discussion, I just want to read a couple paragraphs from this book to kind of set the tone, if you will, about race relations. In the future, race is not defined by color. It is defined by species. There is only one race, human. The NAACP has either closed its doors and boarded up the windows, or they have changed their organization to the NAAP, the National Association for the Advancement of All People. Their focus is the impact of humans on our planet, and they are actively involved in the preservation of our environment. There's not one episode in the entire Star Trek franchise in which a character refers to another by the color of his or her skin. Race is just not an issue in the future. Prejudice is considered primitive. In the episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, Chekhov and Sulu have a brief discussion that reveals this fact. They're having discussion about the hate Lokai and Bele had for each other simply because of the skin difference. In the final bridge scene, Chekhov says, "There was persecution on Earth once. I remember reading about it in my history class." Sulu responds, "Yes, but it happened way back in the 20th century. There's no such primitive thinking today." In the Star Trek universe, Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream has been achieved. Now, of course, there were two events that have occurred in the Star Trek universe, the nuclear war and alien contact, that have made it obvious that skin color means nothing. Our future counterparts understand that color does not designate a new race, but rather demonstrates the breadth of a single race. Now, without having lived through these events, it might be more difficult to see this truth, but it's not impossible. Many people living today would like to stop using color as a reference to others. Perhaps they can help the rest of us see this simple truth without having to annihilate each other or wait for alien contact. Okay, hi again. I'm Dave. I don't make a lot of these videos, so this won't be very professional, but I just needed to share some thoughts with you as, again, in response to the response of President Trump's comments about shithole countries and immigration. As you can tell from what I read in the book, today's America is very different than what our future could be. Our culture has become divided seemingly more than it's ever been before, and there's a lot of folks out there right now putting all the blame on Trump. It's Trump's fault that we're so divided. Now, I think that's partly right, but for a very, very different reason. Trump's recent comment about shithole countries has caused a lot of outrage, but I think it might be something we need to talk about. I think it might be a good thing that it's there. America has used skin color as an excuse. We have used it as a reason. We have used it as a weapon, and we've even used it as a wedge to help divide the United States of America, to break apart our culture. And I'm gonna read a section from my book again, so I'm going to pop up the cover of my book so you don't have to look at me read. The USS Enterprise arrives at Klobda 3 to pick up a young person who is destined to be the leader of Daled 4. Daled 4 has been locked in a civil war for decades. This new young leader has been trained and is charged with finding an end to the violence. Her parents were on opposing sides of the conflict, and it is believed she's the only one who can bring peace. In a conversation on the bridge, Picard tries to discover how the conflict started, but there's no direct information. When Data is asked to speculate, he says that they had developed disparate cultures, which is the cause of most wars. I think that's a very insightful comment and very applicable to what is going on in America today. And we see it exaggerated perhaps 1,000 times right now as a result of President Trump's comment. There are those Americans who have used skin color as the filter through which they see everything that goes on in America. Whether it's a political issue, whether it's a social issue, whether it is an entertainment issue, it's all defined by color. And that's been going on since the Civil Rights Movement. I think there was a very positive thing that happened between 1954 and 1965 with the Civil Rights Movement. The notion that there was this disparity of cultures. Martin Luther King talked about it. He kind of saw the field, this level field we all want to have. There's this level here and this level here. And through the Civil Rights Movement, clearly the whites were up here and black people were down here. And Martin Luther King's goal, his dream, was to see this field level, where everyone just sees each other as Americans. That's it. I don't know this, and I could be very wrong, but I never got a feeling from Martin Luther King's perspective that the notion of civil rights was to define and keep black people separate from white people. I thought it was all about bringing both groups together, one America, one culture. Now, what happened while Martin Luther King was doing his thing was others in the movement kind of realized that this whole notion of victimhood, this whole notion of being persecuted or oppression actually had some pretty cool benefits. It could make a lot of money. It could certainly bring you power. And it could also give you a little notoriety. I mean, America is a very charitable country. We're known as the most charitable country on earth. And the people who saw that as an opportunity went in that direction. Some saw it as a means to power. You could create voting blocks. You could have politicians elected, politicians that were friendly to your ideas and your agendas. Other people just saw it as a way to become famous. It's kind of the old big fish in a small pond thing. And the population back then, let's say, of 250 or whatever it was, 250 million, if you can break apart one population, one select group, the black population, you might be able to become a big fish in that smaller pond. So as the Civil Rights Movement achieved their final goal, the Civil Rights Act of 1965, this notion of identity politics kind of became born. We see it in a lot of areas right now, but I think it was race that grew, that was the foundation of identity politics that we see going on throughout our country in many different groups today. I'm only going to talk about race, but that's where it all began. And it has been going on for so long, it's kind of become like a religion. Those who believe that there is true oppression of black people in America, they believe it in here. And like a religion, they don't really have to listen to facts. They don't have to worry about logic or reason or data. They feel it here, so it must be real. It's become dogma. It's kind of what I refer to as the PC Crusaders, or the religion of racism. This 50-year industry has become pretty powerful. We've learned actually to stop talking about Americans. We don't talk about Americans anymore. We talk about this group of Americans versus this group of Americans. We have split our culture into groups. And I'm going to digress just a little bit here. For those of you that aren't aware of the notion of postmodernism, I encourage you to read up on it. Learn what that's about. It is a political manifestation of identity politics. And it is becoming more and more powerful, but more and more dangerous. And if you think I'm using hyperbole, I'm not. You simply have to look to Canada to get a feel for what postmodernism and politics can do to a free nation. Many of us, I for certain, I've always thought of Canada as a free country, freedom of speech at least. That's not true anymore. They no longer have freedom of speech. Look on the internet, do a search for Canadian Bill C-16 and read what that says. And if that's not enough to convince you, do another search of a Canadian citizen named Lindsay Shepherd. She's a graduate student, I forget what university. But find out what her story is. That is the danger of postmodernism. And I think this postmodernism has kind of connected itself to this identity politics notion, and it's becoming much more militant. So anyway, back to my story. We've been splitting ourselves more and more into groups for so long that we simply have forgotten what America is, or what America was. Okay, I mean, for me, America has always been this notion of American exceptionalism. I was raised to do my best, to work hard, to be responsible for who I am and be accountable for what I do, not blame anyone for my actions. I've always believed that the individual is more important than the federal government. The federal government is important, but it must be limited, it must be strictly monitored, and that as an American, the more freedom I have, as long as I have the notions of accountability and responsibility and hard work, the ceiling is limitless. I can do anything I want. And that's what my parents always taught me. You can be whoever you want to be, do whatever you want to do if you do this. That's my America, and that's where I'm coming from in this video. I think right now we're at a crossroads. And these most recent comments by President Trump is really forcing the issue to make us look at where we're at as America and what this crossroads is all about. So I think the movement that has been going on for these 50 years has been kind of hidden, disguised as behind the notion of multiculturalism or diversity. And I talk about this in the book. Diversity is a good thing among or within a group of people that share some common values. But diversity can be used to actually break apart a group. It's a good or a bad thing depending upon how it's used. And I think, like I say, we've reached this critical mass right now. And as I see things, there's basically two groups of Americans. I don't know if Democrats and Republicans, as I knew them when I grew up. I'm 62 years old, so I feel for when I grew up. But I think the Republican Party and Democrat Party are morphing as we speak. There's two basic camps. Typically, you might see as falling under the Democratic side, this camp of globalism. They kind of believe, and I don't profess to be an expert in this, but they seem to believe that it's time for America to take this next step. Let's get rid of our borders. We're a very wealthy nation. Let's use our wealth and see if we can get that wealth spread down and around the world. Let's bring people out of poverty with that wealth. Let's open up our borders. Let's invite the world in and encourage other countries to do the same, which is that's a reasonable argument. That's a discussion to have. That's a fair argument. Anyone who supports that, I would never call you a racist for thinking that. Not my personal opinion, I don't think we're ready yet. I think there is just so much disparity in the world right now that to simply allow one nation to do that, I think it would tear us completely apart and in so doing, destroy any chances of truly creating one world. I think we need to wait to be better prepared for that. I think a stronger America would better serve that effort. And that brings me to the other side, the other group. And again, they kind of fall loosely under Republicans, but I'm not a Republican or Democrat. I tend to go libertarian. But that's what I call the sovereign state group. They believe America should be one country. They believe borders are important. They believe a shared culture is important. A shared language is important. They believe, like I believe, in certain values, and the power of the individual is what makes a society great, not the power of the federal government. So that's kind of the two camps we're in, and I personally believe Trump is a sovereign statist. I think anyone would agree with that. So as we talk about it, the debate is a fair debate. It's a good discussion. But having that debate, wanting to talk about a sovereign state, believing America should be a sovereign state doesn't make me or Trump a racist. But globalists don't want to have that discussion, because having that discussion would force them to talk about issues they don't really want to talk about. And that's brought us to what Trump's comments were all about, immigration. That's why immigration is so important. To the believer, to the religious zealot of globalism, or the PC crusader, open borders is the goal. That's it. That's what they want. Any discussion to lock down the border is a violation of their fundamental religion. On the other hand, you have the sovereign status, and we can't just have people coming in here haphazardly. We can't have people coming in at their own will and destroying our culture. That is against their religion. So you have these two religions who don't, and the power, and I kind of look at it as a religion because, like I say, they don't have to look at facts, they don't have to look at reason, they can just feel it in here. And when you have two groups of people that are so diametrically opposed that don't have to rely on facts, that's a conflict that no one really wants to have. And I think Trump's comments is pushing us to have that very conflict. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the first question I asked. What if we stopped talking about color? What if we could look at an issue and absolutely force ourselves not to think about color? So I'm going to try that. Now I need to put on my glasses. I'm going to read something to you again. I'm not going to put up the cover of my book. I just want to read this to you. This is information I found online. This is not intended to be the data set anyone would look at to make any real decisions. The whole purpose of this is to show you that there could be data out there that goes beyond color that might support what we should be talking about when it comes to immigration. Right now, we're not talking about any of the things I'm about to mention because we're all focused on color. Trump is a racist. Anyone who supports him is probably a racist. Actually, I think Trump is also Hitler and fascist. So he's a lot of things, and this last comment just reaffirmed those beliefs that those people have, that some people have. So anyway, I went online, and there is an organization called the OECD, and it stands for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Now, they collect data from primarily the industrialized world, but they do some of it, and primarily Europe, but they do include some of Asia and some other countries. A lot of different kinds of data. So the first data set I want to share with you, because I guess let me back up. The comment. Why are we asking, this is what supposedly Trump said, something like this. Why are we pushing for immigration programs that bring us immigrants from these shithole countries? Why don't we try to get immigrants from Norway? Of course, if you're looking at everything through the lens of color, he just said something horrible about black people and something wonderful about white people. And that's a slap in the face to those PC crusaders, to those people who believe in the religion of racism. Boy, that was just a crushing blow. You can't say that. That's horrible. So anyway, so I looked at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, some of the stats. One of the things they measure are high school test scores, reading, writing, and math. Now, some of this data is old, but again, I'm not saying let's use this data. I'm saying here's a way to look at what President Trump said without a color filter, okay? According to this data, and I think this was 2010, Norway ranked 9th of all high school test scores, reading, writing, and math. United States ranked 14th. Now, this organization does not do Haiti and does not do El Salvador, and I'm not going to talk too much about Africa because there's 80 countries. What country was President Trump talking about? I wasn't there. I don't know, but he just said African countries. But we do know El Salvador was mentioned, and I believe Haiti was mentioned, I think. Anyway, the organization of the OECD does have data for Chile and Mexico. Now, they have 35 countries in this research. Again, Norway is 9, we're 14, Chile is 33, Mexico 34. Now I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing, again, we would have to look at data, but I'm guessing El Salvador or Haiti might fall closer to them. So then the question is, if you believe in a sovereign state, like I believe Trump thinks, why is it a bad question to ask? Do we want people coming from a country in which we have high test scores so people are more capable, who can more quickly contribute to our country? Or would you want people from a lower level of accomplishment in high school? That's a fair question. Doesn't make him a racist for asking that question. You may disagree with it. You may have all kinds of reasons to want people of any educational background in high school. But it doesn't make him a racist for raising that possibility. Now, some other data they collect is what they call college attainment. What percentage of people in a country, and this is ages 18 to 64, have attended and gone and completed college? So in America, 44%. In Norway, 42%. Now, again, they don't have Haiti and they don't have El Salvador, but this time they have, in this study, they have Chile, Colombia, and South Africa. Colombia, 22% have gone to college. Chile, 21%. South Africa, 7%. Now, if you're running an immigration program, Where would you want your immigrants to come from? A country where 4 in 10 have gone to college, or a country where less than 1 in 10 have gone to college? Or perhaps 2 in 10 have gone to college? Again, you may disagree with the politics of it, but it doesn't make a person a racist if they want to talk about that. Okay, and then the last data I want to talk about is literacy, the literacy rates. Now, this comes from a website called Psychology Wiki. I don't know how reliable it is, but again, we're not talking about the specific data, just the question. So, according to this website, and they list virtually every country in the UN. So we do have El Salvador and Haiti. El Salvador has a literacy rate of 84%. Haiti has a literacy rate of 62%. Norway and the United States are virtually tied at 99%. So again, if you're looking at a sovereign state and you want to bring people, it's not a right to come to America. It is a privilege to come to America. So we have a right to choose who comes to our country. Australia does that. They refer to it as a merit-based immigration system. Canada does that. Australia does. There are countries that do this. They're not a racist nation for doing this. They care about their country, and they want to make sure that who comes in can basically hit the ground running. Who would you rather have come to your country? Someone who can't even read and write their own language and have to come to a country where they got to learn a new language and they got to learn new customs, or someone that at least is well read in their own language first. These are all fair questions that have nothing to do with race. Now, I probably upset some of you because color filters are very powerful. We've been trained, we've been taught, we've been absolutely, harsh word, brainwashed into believing color is the first thing we think about, and then we can talk about other things. And for me suggesting that Trump's comment might not be about color, but it might be about practicality, that violates the narrative of a lot of special interest groups that they've been pushing this story for years. And you might have heard that kind of, these guys have been pushing this narrative. Who are these guys? I always say follow the money. And the money, who's animately screaming how racist Trump is right now? Hollywood is. Well, who are they? They're the 1%. Who else? Well, we have the globalist politicians, and they may not be doing it for the money. They may have a real political concern because they want to talk about a globalization process, but they don't want to talk about that directly. They want to avoid having to admit that they don't want borders. So they're going to fall into, he's a racist. They want to divert the discussion. Who else is talking about it? A lot of the mainstream media. And who are they? Now, I talk about this more in my book, but basically 5 companies own more than 90% of all the media. Radio, Hollywood, movie studios, TV. We have 5 corporations that are paying these networks and producing a story. Trump is a racist because they don't want to talk about the possibility that America should have borders, or that perhaps Trump is not a racist. And the last group, and I hate to call them this, but I'm going to. I refer to them as skin peddlers. They are leftover skin peddlers from the early civil rights movement, and they still think it's all about justice and equality and persecution. And they would have us believe that we are horribly punishing and oppressing the black people in the United States. Black Lives Matter is one of those groups. And I'm going to just give you some information of what we would consider the Western civilization, the white nations of Europe and Australia, Canada, the United States, these industrialized nations. Of the black populations within those nations that were born and raised in those countries, if you look at per capita, the income of the black population of America is number 1. Per capita, the educational levels reached of black people in those countries is the United States of America. Per capita, the number of people that own their own businesses that are members of the black race are United States. And then one other thing I want to mention, because we're just constantly dragging into this notion of slavery and how we've got to make up for slavery and how horrible America is as we oppress the black people. we were, of the industrialized nations, we were the second to last nation to abolish slavery, and it was a very violent separation. But, and just out of the point of fact, the last country to abolish slavery was in 1981. It was an African country, Mauritania. Anyway, in the last 150 years since we have abolished slavery, two things have happened. One, the United States has become the most powerful country on the planet. Two, the only nation of that group of white nations to elect a black president or leader is the United States of America. So the skin peddlers are telling us how horrible blacks have it in America, but the data suggests something different. Now that's a whole other discussion, but I wanted to bring that up because, again, if we just could stop talking about skin and talk about data, we might actually be able to solve problems. Okay, so we have these billions of dollars and these years of effort that actually gained momentum as when President Obama became president. A lot of the oppressionists, or those, I guess I should call them the PC Crusaders, the religion of racism people, a lot of those people became emboldened. And this whole notion of white privilege, which was something kind of far-fetched in textbooks in small classrooms around the planet, became a real thing. And it's gotten very, very dangerous as to where it's starting to take us. I want you to take a look at this video.
All white people are racist. So I put this up because I really want any white person in the room to know up front that this is what we're dealing with, that it's not going to be this coddling of white tears and what that looks like. We're not going to discuss, oh, maybe some of us have worked it out. No, you're always going to be racist, actually. So even when you're on your path to trying to figure out how to be a better human being, because I believe that white people are born into not being human, like that actually, instead of people of color and black folks being dehumanized, that actually everyone is dehumanized off rip within white supremacy, that y'all are born into a life to not be human, and that's what y'all are taught to do, to be demons. So in this particular way, white people are all racist. So I just want y'all to know that up front.
I couldn't believe it when I first saw it, but this lady was trained. This is what, and I personally believe she believes this. But this lady was trained to say this, and I'm sure she's not the only one. And she is spreading this message to others. That is the power. That is what's happening as identity politics and postmodernism comes together, and this whole notion of using oppression as a means to an end develops. This woman has never met me. She doesn't know who I am. She has no clue that I've lived in Japan for 5 years, that I've lived in China now for 8 years. She has but I'm a racist. I'm a racist because of this. She has no clue at all that my wife is Chinese, but I am a racist because of this. She has no clue at all that my wife is Muslim, but I'm a racist because of this. She knows me having never met me. And she knows more than I'm a racist now. I was born as a racist, and I will die a racist. That is the exact opposite of what Martin Luther King Jr. was all about. That is the exact opposite of doing this. What's happening is some people have moved the identity politics. They want this. They don't want to get rid of racism. They simply want to reverse who the victims are. Whites should now be treated as a second-class citizen because of the color of their skin. Anyway, the movement, the religious diehards within this PC crusade, within this religion of racism, are absolutely stunned that President Trump would make such a comment, because he's daring to talk about an issue without any regard at all for skin color. And as a religion, they cannot tolerate that. And here's another way to look at it. What do you think would happen among Christians if President Trump got up and said, Jesus Christ was not the Son of God. He was just a filthy beggar. Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the true prophet of God. Muhammad, peace be upon him, is who we should follow. And Allah is who we should praise. What do you think Christians would do? How do you think they would feel? How do you think they would respond? That is exactly how these members of the religion of racism, how these PC crusaders feel right now. That's the outrage they feel. They are stunned by this comment Trump made. He dared talk about an issue that kind of, in their world, disparaged black people and raised white people. That's a violation beyond violations. And that's why I think Trump causes this outrage, but for perhaps the right reason. We need to look at beyond the color of skin. We need to look beyond race. Trump is brass, he's crass, he's a bit of an ass, but that doesn't make him a racist. He believes America should be a sovereign state. He believes our borders should be secure. And as President of the United States, his main interest should be the United States of America. He's not a racist, but there are those who are fighting tooth and nail because, like I said, this critical mass is hitting, and Trump is refusing to make it an issue of skin. He is refusing to do that, and that is enraging the other side. Because they have no real ammunition. I mean, if you get to data, there's some serious questions we should be having. In fact, if you look at data, and for about 3 or 4 years, my job at Motorola back in the 80s, I was a coordinator for a program that solved problems. And it's a very simple process. You look at data, you identify where a problem is, then you get the people involved in that particular issue, whatever it may be, together, and you brainstorm for ideas, how to solve it. You list out your solutions, you kind of prioritize which one might have the best chance of working, and then you apply your solution. You continue to look at the data, and if the data goes in the direction you want, you kind of say, success. If the data stays flat, you look at your solution and you try to tweak it. If the data goes down the wrong direction, well, you throw that solution out and you try another solution. That's what people who use reason, logic, and data, empirical evidence, that's how you approach solving a problem. But we have, almost at the level of religion, two groups of people who just resist logic and resist data. Now, a little bit of a digression that has brought me to a kind of an epiphany about, and I'm going to call them Black Americans, but I don't mean that. And soon I'll tell you why, or demonstrate why. There are many videos on YouTube of people that don't look like this. And by the way, I want to share something. I'm always classified. People other than me have called me a white person. I want to show you. This is white, and this is me. If A does not equal B, or if B does not equal A, then A does not equal B. I'm not white. I am a person of color. That's another reason to stop referring to people as color. I don't know if I've ever seen a black person in my life. But I have discovered on YouTube there are Americans that don't look like me that believe exactly as I believe. They are my brothers. They are my community members. They are my friends. And every time I see them, especially the videos that are made by people that don't look like me, I feel so good because I recognize that there is hope for the future. So in my world, there's going to be two kinds of people that don't look like me. There's going to be African Americans. They are the globalists. They are the ones who believe race is everything. They are the ones who believe they have been held down, pushed down, killed, persecuted, and otherwise punished so they cannot be equal. And then there are Americans. I'm an American, and there's all kinds of Americans that don't look like me. So I'm going to offer an invitation and a challenge, perhaps. I hope more than 8 or 10 people see this video, but let's assume 8 people see it. I'm hoping at least 25% of you take me up on my invitation. This is the book, like I showed you the cover of. And I created a Facebook group. It's called Make It So America. Make It So America. And if you go to that Facebook group, I am encouraging you, please come to that Facebook group. Let's identify a problem. And let's commit to trying to solve it without once talking about color. Let's see if we can approach any problem. And I don't care if it's immigration. It might be that's on the radar these days, or it could be how the Arizona Cardinals fell apart this last year. Let's find some problem, and let's see if we can talk about it without talking about color of skin. Let's focus on data. Let's look at the process of identifying what we want, what we think we could do, and how we could get there. Now, I do a lot of that in this book, whether it's taxes, whether it's immigration, education. All of those issues are addressed in this book, but they're addressed through the filter of our future, not the color of our skin. And there's two very different things. So this is the video. Sorry it took so long, but thank you for listening. And I hope to see you come to the Facebook group and say, hey, Dave, I think it's interesting what you said. Let's talk about it. And we'll go from there. Take care.